Magandang gabi. Dala Nag-share lang muna. Sandali, mali yata yung shinare ko na screen. Saglit lang. At this, remove. Share. Stop screen. Dali lang po para makita niyo yung part ng decision na gusto natin pakita. Mali pa rin. Dali lang po. There. Okay. Dali lang po. Ayan. Gandang gabi sa inyong lahat. I apologize for a little late today, pero I had to set this up. So, welcome to Luminous. Ako po si Trixie Cruz-Angeles. Kung naisin niyo po at kung maaari, huwag niyo pong kakalimutan i-like at share itong live natin ngayon. Now, as we know, today, nag-promulgate, ang promulgation po, yan yung binabasa yung isang resolution. Nag-promulgate ang COMELEC Second Division. Nag-promulgate ang COMELEC Second Division on the petition for cancellation of COC ni BBM. Ang nag-file po ito si Father Buenafe and he was et al. And he was represented by Attorney Teddy Te. Now, first, let's clear some things. Merong mga nagsasabi na merong citation ng Wikipedia and all of that. Now, it's funny, yes, and I agree it is extremely funny. But in filing a petition, kung hindi naman material or hindi relevant, so you cite something, but it is not really part of the case, kumbaga, it just helps illustrate it, then a citation, regardless of where it comes from, merong iba Biblia, merong iba Shakespeare and all that, the lawyer has a free hand to do that, particularly dun sa first part ng parang the introduction of the petition. So while it is funny, okay, yes, and we can make jokes about it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it determines the quality of the petition. Also, let's disabuse ourselves of any preconceived notions na itong mga taong to are stupid. They're not. It's much worse than that. All right. So let's get started. Nag-decide ang promulgation po is kapag binabasa ng isang hukuman or in this case, yung second division ng COMELEC, binabasa nila yung kanilang decision and binabasa ito publicly because necessarily the public has to know, di ba? Oops, wala akong charger. Alright, the public has to know about the goings on here, and it's necessary that, kumbaga, part of making the proceedings public is to read out a decision. Alright, so today, instead of reading out the decision, taking COVID into consideration, ni-release na lang po yung resolution at it was a 32-page resolution. And in that resolution, nakikita natin that the gist of the decision is this. Now, while the assertion made by BBM in his Certificate of Candidacy is material, it is not misrepresentation. So, kasi ang sinasabi ng kabilang parlor, there was material misrepresentation dun sa entry ni BBM sa kanyang Certificate of Candidacy. Now we have to understand what is material and what is misrepresentation. When you say material, ibig sabihin nun relevant. Relevant dun sa pagiging candidate niya, relevant dun sa pag-execute niya ng COC, which must be executed with truthfulness. Kasi that is a sworn statement. Nakanotaryo yon, ibig sabihin si BBM umarap sa notaryo at nag-swear dun sa notaryo who's authorized to take oaths na siya ay nagsasabi ng totoo. So when he checked that box that says na hindi siya um, convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude at hindi siya convicted of a crime with a penalty of more than 18 months. I apologize kasi parang dun sa dati kong live 16 ako ng 16, it's 18 months. Okay. So, um, ibig sabihin, he is qualified. He is stating for the whole world to know and for the COMELEC to as part of his declaration to the COMELEC na siya ay mayroong kakayahan at qualified siya maging kandidato para presidente ng bansa. Mga nagtatanong tungkol dun sa differences ng ano, do not assume, guys, and I will keep repeating this because it is wrong. Never assume that one division will decide in the same way as another division is going to do that. Do not delude yourselves. Okay? Please don't do that. Do not make assumptions like that. There is a reason why there are two different divisions, and those divisions can decide independently of each other. Now, whether or not those merits weigh heavily or the evidence weighs heavily, that's what they're going to decide on. They're not going to decide on whether or not the other division decided a certain way. All right? Wag pong i-assume dyan because, you know, it will happen also in the Supreme Court, it happens in the Sandigan Bayan, and so on. Posible yan na isang division at another division magkasalungat even if the facts are similar. But it will never happen that there are two divisions deciding the same case. Alright, so let's disabuse yourselves of that notion. Now, material misrepresentation. Anong ibig sabihin ng material? So relevant. Relevant sa pagiging kandidato niya. He's stating for the world to know and to understand na qualified siya. Mayroong kakayahan, meron siyang kwalifikasyon, kumpleto yung kanyang kwalifikasyon. Alright. Doon sa ano, sa so material. And then misrepresentation. Misrepresentation means it is an untruth. You misrepresented yourself. Ibig sabihin, represent, kinatawan. Meaning, ikaw mismo, ang sinasabi mo, hindi totoo as compared to the real thing. So, the real thing is that you're convicted. The false thing is that you're not. And then, okay, so material misrepresentation is a term that lawyers use. Kasi it's okay to misrepresent little things. O ganyan, meron kang citation, Wikipedia. Hindi naman accurate yan. Pero hindi siya material. Kumbaga, meron ka lang quotation, poems, ganyan-ganyan. Hindi siya material to the case. So, in this case, material misrepresentation relevant to his candidacy. Now, ang sinasabi ng COMELEC simply, and I reduce this to only its basic parts, is this. The checking of that box, yung sinasabi, oops, low bat. Sige. Yung pag-check po ng box ni BBM pagdating dun sa wait, nahanap ko yung charger ko. Yung pag-check niya ng box doon sa saying na hindi siya convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude or of a crime punishable by 18 months is material. In other words, it is very relevant. If misrepresentation yan, then maaari talagang i-cancel yung Certificate of Candidacy. That's what it means when we're saying material. Meanwhile, sorry, magulo na naman ang bahay ko. Daming construction nangyayari. Alright. So, in the meantime, sabi ng COMELEC, while it is indeed material, is it misrepresentation? Ay, ganyan kasi mag-isip pagka lawyers, tsaka pagka nagde-decide ng case. You will break it up, babaklasin mo yung mga arguments, babaklasin mo pati yung mga facts, and reduce it to its parts. So in this case, sige, material lang, misrepresentation ba? So now they go into whether or not PBM is disqualified from running for has been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude or has been convicted of a crime punishable by more than 18 months. Now, yung mga petitioners, they were citing a provision in the National Internal Revenue Code. Unfortunately, and sadly, bakit nawala yung charger ko? Sadly for the petitioners, they misquoted the law, which is which is ano which is well bad. Okay. I don't want to accuse them of things like, lying under oath or lying to the court or misrepresenting to the court something awful. But there it is. The COMELEC was telling the petitioners that you deliberately were misleading and that you deliberately misquoted the law. Apparently, tignan ninyo yung ano dito, yung nasa screen. Sabi ng COMELEC, petitioners appear to have deliberately misquoted the applicable law. With note with agreement, ibig sabihin nag-agree sila dun sa sinabi ng respondents na yung batas, nagbago yan several times. Inamyendahan yung batas. So nung inamyendahan nila yung batas, makikita natin na yung kino-quote ng petitioners was the older law first and then dinagdagan nila ng words. So this is not simply a typo na, ay, ang na-quote ko is the older law. They said that the penalty for failure to file an income tax return is a fine and imprisonment. Relevant yung word na and, hindi or. Samantalang the older law simply says or. Ibig sabihin dito, at the time that BBM allegedly committed the crime of failure to file his income tax return, the penalty could only be a fine. Pero ang pinalabas nila in the petition is that the penalty could be a fine and imprisonment. So dito na po papasok yung sinasabi ni Justice Carpio that he has an unserved sentence. Okay? So ito, tingnan nyo. Respondents act therefore of altering the respondents. Petitioners shamelessly cited a certain provision denominated as Section 254 of the 1977 NIRC. Contrary to the petitioner's claim and deliberate misquoting of the law, the penalty of imposing may typo dito. Sabi nila respondents, but it's the petitioner. So, contrary to petitioner's claim and deliberate misquoting of the law, the penalty of imposing both as a fine and imprisonment only became mandatory on December 11, 1998. Anong ibig sabihin yan? This is what we call an ex post facto law. Bawal yon. Kung yung batas is later than the act that constitutes a crime, hindi po pwede maging retroactive yon. So, kunwari, pinatay ni A si B in 1972, if a law was passed barring that kind of killing in 1990, hindi po yan mag-a-apply to the older act, to the act before. Petitioners and counsel knowingly misrepresented provisions of law not yet applicable in the case at bar and knowingly misquoted Section 254 by making it appear that it concerned the word and rather than or, sabi ng COMELEC. Here, what's more, okay, in addition to that, sabi ng COMELEC, petitioners' propensity to mislead is at once apparent in their act of branding the cases faced by respondents as tax evasion. This was failure to file income tax return, pero sinasabi ng petitioner, tax evasion yan. Those are two different things. Di ba? At the start pa lang of the controversy, kami na yung nagsabi niyan. You heard it first. Sabi namin, wait, there's a difference between a failure to file a tax return and a failure to pay your taxes. The failure to pay your taxes or to pay the correct taxes, that's tax evasion. Failure to file an ITR is failure to file an ITR. Here, Failure to file income tax return is not tax evasion. Yay, we called it. Sabi, in this case, the Court of Appeals found that respondent, being an elected public official for the taxable years concerned, was already subject to withholding tax. So, yun yung kinukwento natin sa karambola. May withholding tax na siya. So, in other words, kinuha na yung taxes, hindi lang na-declare in an income tax return. Hindi na file yung return. So, an accompanying state of mind which is described. So, dito, kailangan for the end to be achieved, the payment of less than that is known by the taxpayer to be legally due or non-payment of tax when it is shown that the tax is due with the accompanying state of mind. Kumbaga, there's an intention not to pay the correct taxes. Here, the correct taxes were actually paid, but the tax return was not filed. Okay. So, sabi ni Ma'am Pinay, nakita daw ni na commenting yung sinabi natin. I don't think so. I think that any lawyer would have seen this. Ito, petitioners appear to have deliberately misquoted the applicable law. We note with agreement respondent submission, so sinasabi niya na, sabi na ang respondents yung nagsabi, ito yung history ng batas na yan. In 1977, this is section 73. In section 2288, all of them were in 1977. And then later on, nagbago yung batas. Later on, na-include na yung and imprisonment. Pero ang sinasabi ng petitioners, minimisquote nila, sinasabi nila kasama daw yung imprisonment in the earlier law para pumasok si BBM doon. The COMELEC said that was deliberate. And medyo napagsabihan sila doon. Not really a scolding. There's no threat of disbarment or suspension or any penalty on them or any disciplinary action. Pero sinasabi may deliberate misquoting dito. Now, the COMELEC was also saying this petition should have been dismissed outright. Pero sige, kumbaga, in the interests of justice, gagawa kami ng full-blown resolution para makita ninyo kung ano ang nangyari dito. Ngayon, tinatanong ni, I hope, and I see here the irony. The irony is that the entire petition is rests on the assertion. So, ang sinasabi ng mga petitioners, nagsinungaling si BBM, convicted siya. Convicted siya of a crime involving moral turpitude or of a crime punishable by over 18 months. And in fact, meron pang hirit na di pa nga niya nasuserve yung imprisonment niya. And the COMELEC says, no, wait, that's not what happened here. And in fact, the COMELEC also goes into whether or not BBM was capable of filing his tax return in 1986. Sabi nga niya, ng COMELEC, hindi pa tapos yung period to file taxes. February sila pinaalis ng Pilipinas. April ang deadline ng filing. So it was already impossible for him to have filed his tax return for 1985 in 1986. May mga ganun yung COMELEC, nakakatuwa yung decision. Of course, meron din portion na pinapagalitan nila si respondent, pero medyo na siya, not as heavy, kumbaga, as the allegations against the petitioners, what they're saying about the petitioners. So, sabi ng COMELEC, dito naman tungkol dun sa respondent, this is BBM, kasi sinasabi nila, in the memorandum, respondent began his discussion by arguing that this commission has no jurisdiction to rule on qualifications. Pero ang sabi ng COMELEC, mali kayo doon. Meron. But because you're citing a provision in the Constitution that pertains to the President when you're simply a candidate for President. So in this case, the COMELEC has jurisdiction. Zero, sabi ng COMELEC, it is worth stressing that herein respondent is not the President of the Philippines, he is merely a candidate. for president and commonly referred to as a presidentiable. If the Constitution intended that the Supreme Court should be the sole judge of all contests relating to the qualifications of presidentiable, the highest law of the land would have expressly stated so. So, hindi po nag-a-apply yan. Nevertheless, sinasabi po ng COMELEC, while the representation is, the ticking of the box is material, but it is not misrepresentation because it is clear in the Court of Appeals decision that there is no penalty of imprisonment imposed on BBM. Even an imprisonment term of less than 18 months, wala din po yon. And therefore, he does not fall into the Omnibus Election Code provision on being disqualified if you are penalized for a crime involving moral turpitude or with a penalty of over 18 months. Okay. Let's see your questions. Ma'am Lynn Togado, first of all, it's a bar exam. Tinatanong niya, paano pumasa yung former judges na yan? Who are you referring to former judges? The representative here na nasabihan is Attorney Teddy Te, and he was never a judge. He was with the Supreme Court's Public Information Office. Now, if you're asking if paano sila pumasa ng board, that's it's because they know the law. Okay? And let's make a difference between stupidity and a misrepresentation. So sinasabi ng COMELEC dito, they're not saying that they were stupid, no, but that they deliberately misquoted the law here. And that's where I'm saying it's a little worse than stupidity. It's not stupid. You cannot accuse them of stupidity, but they were less than forthright in citing the law here, and they were called out by the COMELEC. And let's not get extreme, guys. Si Attorney Gadon. Nagsasabi si Attorney Gadon daw sa likod ko. Ito, and I will repeat, Renover Kiatchon says it is sufficient to say that the same decision will be made by the First Division. Never assume that. Never. Number one, these are two separate cases and they're two separate causes of action. Dito sa second division, it's cancellation of the certificate of candidacy. In the first division, it is disqualification. Now, bakit malaki yung difference nun? Malaki yung difference in their effects. Kapag disqualification, a disqualified candidate can be substituted. But a person whose certificate of candidacy is cancelled cannot be substituted. So, what we're saying here is these are two very different cases, even if they rely on the same grounds. Okay? Because you can, actually, dun sa decision ng COMELEC sa second division, they're saying that actually this is a petition for cancellation, which is really a petition for disqualification in disguise. Something like that. Okay? Sabi ni Ma'am Lynn, I agree with you, but why did they change the words? And that's where the COMELEC, you have to listen to what the COMELEC is saying. The COMELEC is saying it was deliberate. They're misleading. So sinasabi ka ng COMELEC dito, this case should have been dismissed. It should not even have gotten this far, which might imply that the petitioners were really just pushing it. Kumbaga, wala talaga silang karga, pero tinutulak nila. And there are two reasons for that. One, baka makalusot. And two, for political purposes. Okay? So, no, Miss Lynn, kasi yung mga wanting to change the law, no, it has nothing to do with that. They are misquoting the law so that they can create a big deal out of PBM's candidacy. In all probability, they know that this would not fly, but they filed it anyway. And this is frowned upon by the Supreme Court, ha? Sabi ni Leonardo Ansag, meron pa po bang mga kahalintulad ng DQ case ni BBM na natitira pa? Natitira na lang po yung tatlong kaso na nasa first division. Okay? Uh, Member na ba ng Supreme Court si former Justice Carpio nang naglabas sila ng statement or decision na tax evasion is not moral turpitude? I'm not sure, but this case is Republic versus Sandigan Bayan, but I don't know the year. Medyo matagal na ito because it involves the estate of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. So medyo matagal-tagal na, it's possible na hindi pa po. But it doesn't really matter. You're supposed to know it. Sabi ni Kalya 218, ibig sabihin, mali, steady test applying for moral turpitude. O yun, ganon. Sabi ni Ma'am Ruth, sa sobrang talino ni Carpio, Tedite et al., sa palagay nila, kaya nilang baluktutin ang batas para mapanindigan ang kanilang paniniwala kahit mali. Do you know that the NPA, they really think that they're doing the right thing, even if it's against the law? So I think that sometimes people who consider themselves activists, they they call themselves in pursuit of the higher good, and that higher good sometimes daw goes beyond the law. So well, it happens a lot, and it happens to us. Halimbawa, pag nananawagan ng RevGov o revolution, technically that's inciting to rebellion. Pero if it's in pursuit of a higher good, that's what we tell ourselves so that we don't consider ourselves the bad guys. So that's what happens. I think sometimes that's what happens. I'm not saying that that's what happened here, but I'm saying is that that's how we should look at them. That they think that they're in pursuit of a higher good. Sabi ni Sutil Persona, you answered my question in my mind. Purposely misleading, baka sakaling makalusot or politically motivated, or both. Sabi ni G, paano mag-work ang MR? Kailangan po ba may new evidence para pansinin ng motion? No, but you need to be more persuasive and you can come up with new, not new, better arguments. Ngayon, dito, they won't file an MR but they will appeal to the NBank because this is a decision of the division. Unless nagmamadali sila, they might try to go to a higher court before the NBank. So, it's possible. Pero ang tingin ko dito, in-announce na kasi ni Attorney Ted that they will appeal to the NBank. Sabi ni Carlos Hebres, well explained, sampal yan sa mga nagtatanga-tangahan ng mga lawyers, baka sakali makalusot, buti andiyan ka at naliwanagan kami ang mga hampas lupa mo. Ako nga hampas lupa. Eto, sabi ni Loy, gaano ba kalalim ang galit nila sa mga Marcoses? Sila sumisigaw ng human rights or at democracy, pero silang unang lumalabag dito. Well, I don't want to, kumbaga, make a sweeping generalization. Ang nakikita natin lang is this particular case. Sinasabi nila, si BBM ang nagsinungaling, and wow, the tables are turned with the resolution of the COMELEC's second division. Sinasabi ngayon ng second division, wait, kayo yata yung hindi truthful dito. So, I don't think we can apply it to everything that they do. Kumbaga, pagka magsasabi tayo na ganun sila, kailangan magsasite tayo ng particular instance. We can't say that they're that way all the time. Sabi ni Lala Classic, tuloy pa rin ba printing ng ballots kahit wala pang decision kay Guanzon? Most likely hindi pa po, which is why hindi pwedeng magtagal yung promulgation ng First Division. Okay, para dun sa mga nagtatanong, what's the status of the cases before the First Division? Si Toby T. ata nagtanong. Yan. What is the status? What's the status of the cases in the First Division? So, ang sabi dito is that, well, it's promulgation. May decision na po. But a promulgation makes the decision public. So, binabasa yan. Important part of the process yan. So, hindi lang po natuloy yung promulgation kasi maraming na-expose na staff ng First Division. They're not sick, sabi ni Comweng, Bing, Guanzon, because basta sabi niya na-expose sila. Tinatanong ni Carl Allen Yu, can the lawyers be subject to disciplinary proceedings for misquoting the law on the ground of ignorance? Well, it's not ignorance. It's not. Like I said, if you say it's ignorance, they have an excuse. It's still a disciplinary issue, but I think that they know the law. And but I'm not sure if it's Attorney Teddy Pe himself. Whoever drafted the pleadings here uh, deliberately misquoted the law. And that's not a small thing. You're right that there's a possibility for a disciplinary case. That's if somebody will file it. BBM can file it, or the party of BBM can file it. The COMELEC commissioners can file it. I'm not sure if the public can, but it's also possible for the public to do that. You can file the case with the Supreme Court. But the way I see it, considering the high profileness of the lawyers involved here, the Supreme Court will probably at best admonish them, katulad ng ginawa po nila dun kay Chel Jokno. Sabi ni Glenn Romero, nagtataka lang ako dito kay Carpio nung tumakbo si BBM sa Vice President. Bakit di nila inungkat yan nun? Dahil, okay, uulitin ko to ha. This is a question that is often asked and repeatedly so. So, uulitin ko din yung sagot ko. Bakit ngayon lang? Sabi ng Korte Suprema dun sa Halosos case that they can raise it at any time because it goes into the qualification of a candidate. Hindi po ito touch move. O hindi niyo na raise yung issue nung tumakbo siya before, bakit mo i-raise ngayon? You're not stopped. Tinatawag natin estoppel. Na you should have raised it at the earliest instance. No, the Supreme Court has already said in a previous case na it can be raised at any time. So this is not an issue that can be raised legally. Pwede kayong magtaka, but it has no legal merit or very little. Ma'am Aimee, kung hindi niyo po kami nakikita, all you have to do is unfollow, refresh the page, and then follow again and put in your favorites. Kasi alam niyo naman, it's FB, so you can reset the algorithm. Okay, John Carlo Espiritu says, can Senator Aimee replace BBM for presidential candidate if the First Division favors the Attorney Te petition? First of all, the First Division is not entertaining Attorney Te's petition because that is a different case altogether. It's the Akbayan plus one other case in the two other cases in the First Division. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, a petition for disqualification, not a petition for cancellation. Now, for lawyers, that's a big deal. So those are two totally different cases. And since those are two separate divisions, well, even if both cases were in the same division, one case might possibly not affect the other. Now, in separate divisions, the other division is not committed or cannot be compelled to decide in the same way that the second division did. So that's number one. Can Senator Aimee replace BBM? Only if she is a member of the party. So ayan, tinatanong uli ni Ricky King at uulitin ko po, magkahiwalay po na division yan, magkaibang klase ng kaso yan, so hindi po maaapektuhan ng decision ng second division ang decision ng first. Hindi po makokompel yung first decision to decide in the same way as the second division. Huwag po tayong mag-ilusyon na magiging pareho yan, because they're bound by it. It's possible na magiging pareho yung decision because they read the law the same way. Pero it will not necessarily follow. Okay? Sabi ni Laboy, yung mga nakulong ng ilang taon at tumakbo pa ng office, pwede din po ba i-DQ? Kung convicted sila of a crime involving moral turpitude or punishable by over 18 months, they will be disqualified for 5 years. unless meron silang perpetual disqualification as imposed by a special law or by the revised penal code. So, um, it will depend. Bakit hindi na consolidate yung pre-petitions? Because they are different causes of action. You mean dun sa first division. They were heard at the same time but not consolidated, possibly because they were making different citations or iba-iba yung arguments nila. Yes, yung first division po, yun yung kay Weng or Bing Gonzon. Sabi ni Mercury, if ma-deny din ng first division, okay na po ba for BBM? Wala na po bang hadlang? Actually, baliktad po. The presumption is pwede siya. So, kailangan magkaroon ng adverse decision dun sa COMELEC para matigil yung candidacy niya. So, ibig sabihin, kahit ngayon, okay siya, walang hadlang. Kailangan merong desisyon na kontra sa kanya na yun ang magiging hadlang. That is the presumption. Okay? So, sabi ni Joey Mancilla, di ba ang pumasok lang sa deadline ng filing ay yung kay Teddy Te, yung iba ay sumabit lang. Iba po yun. Yun yung mga cases ni na Atty. Calleja et al. Pati dun sa kay Danilo Lihay-Lihay. Ngayon, those were filed late. Halimbawa, yung kay Attorney Howard Calleja, he was representing another group. What they filed was a petition in intervention kasi nga hindi sila aabot sa deadline. So ang ginawa ng COMELEC, dinismiss yun, hindi inallow yung intervention because it was something like a way around the deadline. Iba po yun, yung mga hindi umabot sa deadline na dismiss na po yun last month pa. Sabi ni Hernan, nung tinanong po si Spock Jimenez kanina, binanggit po niya na kailangan ka-apelyidong papaletter. It does not say sa rule na kailangan same party. Check ko yung omnibus election code. Double check ko ha. Let me get back to you. Posibleng ang mali ako. Mas of course, Attorney Jimenez has the advantage here. So, kung ako kayo, maniwala muna kayo kay Attorney Jimenez. Ay, hindi pa siya abogado. Kay Spock Jimenez. But I will have to get back to you on that one. The double check ko po but yes, if we follow the rule that's being stated by Spock Jimenez, then that would be correct. Pwede po si Senator Aimee because she goes by the same surname. Kaya nga, John Paul, sinasabi ko, I have to get back to you. Ako, I will defer to Attorney Jimenez. Okay? It's not necessary na party mate niya, etc. So, okay? Okay na ha? O, ulitin ko. I will defer to Attorney Jimenez on the replacement by a person with the same surname. Okay? So, Senator Aimee pwede. Alright? Pwede rin si si Attorney Lisa. All right. Roses Jorge asks, how about the Erap case and Trillanes case? Bakit nakatakbo pa sila sa national position? Si Erap was pardoned, and his pardon erased his criminal conviction and restored him to pre-conviction state. Ibig sabihin, lahat yon wala na. Tanggal na. And so he goes back to the days prior to his conviction, his status then, which means na pwede na siyang tumakbo. Si Senator Trillanes, former Senator Trillanes, was convicted of libel, but he appealed to a higher court. When you appeal a case, nasususpend yung finality niya. So it is not final. So dahil hindi siya final, pwede pa rin siyang tumakbo. Guys, wag naman paulit-ulit. Sinabi ko na nga, let us defer to Attorney Jimenez pagdating dun sa substitution. Okay? Pero take note, kung grant yung petition for cancellation, hindi po pwedeng i-substitute. Okay? Ito, sabi ni the engineers, kakabalita lang sa ay kakabalita lang sa GMA ng dismissal ng case, parang walang gana magbalita, di man lang pinaliwanag. Okay. Parang pa-showbiz kasi si second division o intention on the part of Marcos to deceive the electorate. Parang sinabing assumption is true yung iniiyak na tax evasion versus PBM. Wait. Unang-una, stop using the term tax evasion. Kasi failure to file income tax return yan, and those are two different things. And in fact, the COMELEC has an extensive discussion, has a longer discussion doon sa tax evasion. Kasi nga, sinasabi nila material but not misrepresentation. Ganito po kasi yon. For anybody to be penalized, kasi pwedeng there's no intention to lie. There's no intention to, because, kasi perjury, mga ganun. There's no intention to lie kasi you don't know otherwise. Well, and you don't know otherwise because the court did not state so. Right? um, wag po kayong masyadong sensitive kasi ganyan po talaga ang language pagka sa hukuman or in this case, in the COMELEC. Gerald says, can a citizen file a disbarment case against attorney theft for misleading an ordinary for misleading? Ordinary citizen being a former spokesperson of SC, he was on his in his capacity dapat to inform, not to mislead. Can you file? Yes. I'm not sure if it will fly, but yes, you can file. Um, bakit parang galit kayo sa akin? Bakit si ganito nakatakbo? Bakit si ganyan nakatakbo? Bakit parang galit kayo sa akin? Ha, hindi naman ako yung gumagawa ng rules. Ini-explain ko lang sa inyo. How about the case of Senator Joel Villanueva? First, although he was found guilty of grave misconduct which carries with it a penalty of disqualification, hindi po maliwanag kung ano na nangyari. Did he appeal the case? Did that become final and executory? Or is it simply because nobody has filed a disqualification case? Hindi po maliwanag dyan. Hindi po siya suspended, sabi ni Roger Lavinia. Bakit po ba parang galit nga kayo? Huwag naman po kayong magalit because we're just trying to explain. Yung mga tipong, ay bakit si ganyan, bakit si ganito. First of all, that's not an argument ha, kasi magkakaiba ang mga kaso. Hindi po natin pwede ihambing yung magkaparehong kaso unless they were decided on the same grounds or using the same law. Okay? Ito, sabi ni Elmer, I see. Pero grabe, daming nag-iingay sa Twitter, puro tax evasion. When in fact, multiple instances na pinaliwanag na hindi nga. So, yun na nga. That's why we're discussing this. The irony is that sila yung mahilig magsabi na fake news, fake news. Tapos sila yung mahilig magsabing, yan, di nagbayad ng tamang buwis, takot sa Zoom and all of that. And all of that, that's all fake. Okay, those are all untrue. And here, the nerve to say that BBM lied when here the COMELEC is saying there is a deliberate uh, misquoting of the law here. So, BJ Cans, that's incorrect. Nahanap ko, nakita ko dito. Right. Hindi po tama yan. Dismiss na yung tax evasion sa RTC at failure to file ng penalty. Hindi, well, okay, the RTC convicted him on both counts. Okay? In the CA, hindi na siya ni-reverse na po at minodify yung judgment. Pinabayad na lang siya. But that doesn't mean na hindi siya convicted. Okay? It's possible that, hindi ko nakita yung decision. But, wait, let me see. Doon sa CA decision, tama, ni-reverse nila yung tax evasion and they modified the failure to file income tax return. Sabi ni Testo, may iba lang. Kawawa kasi ibang candidates, hindi napapag-usapan. Are the detained like De Lima allowed to shoot campaign ads? Sensya na alibadbaran ako pag lumalabas siya sa YT, hindi pa pwedeng skip. As long as the court is informed that she is, well, as long as hindi siya lumalabas sa kulungan niya, because to do that, she has to get the permission of the court. But there's nothing that says she cannot have campaign ads. Okay. Clark Sam says, bakit nakakalusot pa rin ang mga party list? Ay! Teka, nawala. Sandali. Sorry. Bakit nakalusot pa rin ang mga party list ng mga makakaliwang grupo sa list ng 2022 elections? Bakit? Nabago ba yung batas o yung constitution? Gayong majority ay ayaw sa kanila. But the majority can change their mind about anything but the law hasn't changed. Ayaw sa kanila at harap-harapan na silang gumugulo sa mga kababayan natin. Now, kaya nga mahalaga yung elections, magboboto tayo ng mga tao who will possibly modify the law. Okay? Hindi po nabago ang saligang batas, walang napasang bagong batas. To be fair, hindi tayo gumawa ng People's Initiative to create a new law to amend the provisions of the party list law. So, as long as hindi nababago yung batas, tuloy pa rin. Sabi ni Gerardo Alaranya, tama po ba ang politiko pag final and executory decision, doon lang sila hindi na pwedeng tumakbo? Yes, but it will also depend kasi kapag hindi siya crime involving pagka crime involving moral turpitude, basta wala siyang perpetual disqualification, 5 years lang yung disqualification under the Omnibus Election Code. So, pwedeng after 5 years, pwede nang tumakbo ulit. Sabi ni Gaming, I think one of the reasons why BBM failure to file nasa political persecution kasi sila sa Amerika. Guys, that only applies to 1986, which means the tax return of 1985. Yun, we can excuse that because of what happened in 1986. But that does not excuse them for the failure to file from 1982 to 1984. But, arguing this is moot kasi nga, meron ng decision. So, na-modify na yun. They only required him to pay a fine for the failure to file the tax return. So, hindi na natin kailangan i-argue pa yan. In fact, dun sa decision ng COMELEC, parang sinasabi ng COMELEC ganito. And we explained this in Karambola, and I'm so happy na pareho kami ng inisip. Now, for that to become a material misrepresentation, yung pag-check ni BBM dun sa box na hindi siya convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude or of a crime punishable with a penalty of over 18 months, kailangan maliwanag yon. Meaning, may decision ang korte, ang hukuman, that decision has become final and it is clear there that it is either a crime involving moral turpitude or a penalty of over 18 months. Ngayon, ang sinasabi nun sa petition ni Attorney Teddy is, perpetually disqualified naman siya. Pag perpetually disqualified, ayon sa revised penal code, hindi kailangan isulat yan sa decision. Wait, that's not true. Kasi, yung perpetual disqualification na sinasite nila is not the revised penal code, it is the National Internal Revenue Code. At yung National Internal Revenue Code, because it is a special law, para maging perpetually disqualified ka under that law, first, that law had to have been passed at the time of the crime or earlier, or if it applies to BBM, it should be stated in the decision. Sabi ni Jonas, maganda yung topic nyo kanina sa Karambola, let all the chismis at paninira kay BBM at Inday para pag sila na umupo, puro old issues na lang sila. Pwede po bang kasuhan nila BBM at Inday Sara, mga naninira sa kanila sa kabilang parlor? Bakit pa ang takot nila kay BBM at Inday? Takot ba sila na balikan sila ng mga Marcoses dahil sa tagal nilang sinisiraan ng mga ito? Okay, general rule, in case you haven't noticed, si BBM po, hindi siya mahilig pumatol. Hindi siya patola. And they're very used to it. Sanay sila na nasasabihan ng kung ano-anong masama, and they just let it roll off them. Kasi, if you stop at every barking dog, you're not going to get anywhere. So I understand that everybody wants to file cases and all that, but the only persons who can file cases sa mga paninira na to ay yung tao na siniraan. At kung sila, they don't feel like they're up to it or don't really want to waste time on it or think that it's not a good use of their time, wala sa ating pwedeng magpilit nun. Side comment, sabi ni Mercury Pluto, mula sa inyo, may kinalaman po ba ang taas ng percent ni BBM Sara mga surveys? What do you mean mula sa amin? I don't understand. Why? I think it's a reaction dun sa mga dun sa failure ng mga dilaw. It's on our page actually. Sabi na, it isn't so much about the vindicating the Marcos name as it is anger at the people who presumed to take power after that. Parang, after all of these years, what have you got to show for yourselves? Nothing. So, parang, parang best revenge eh. Parang yung, ako kunwari, inis na inis ako at the Noynoy administration for a lot of reasons, including yung pangingialam nila with certain cases that I was handling. Now, sa akin, even without BBM's qualifications and all that, dahil galit lang ako dun sa kabila. Gaya ng ginagawa ni Lenny, pwede ko rin gawin yan. Galit ako sa Aquino administration and you're the closest candidate who emulates all of them. I'm not voting for you. I'm voting for the person whom you don't want. I'm voting for the very person who represents everything you are not. For me, that's enough. I'm voting for somebody who isn't them because we've tried them and nada. Nothing good. Ed RC says, halimbawa may tumakbo in the future na pagka-presidente ng Pilipinas na PWD. Ground for disqualification ba yun? Di ba meron po tayong batas na na protecting yung ating differently abled citizens? So definitely it's not going to be a ground for disqualification unless the disability pertains to the sanity of the person. So pagka yung insane or mental issues amounting to insanity or incapability to perpetually be in a lucid state, then yun, madi-disqualify sila. Naaalala ko yung line sa Suits. The rules dictate that you must be precise as the law is a precise endeavor. Yes. Haha, daming hanash ng kabilang parlor. Sila nagpapalabo ng sarili nilang mundo. Para dun sa mga nananawagan ng rally-rally and all that, ako, I will just listen to my unity. So, if si Inday or si BBM ang nanawagan nun, I'm going to be right there, front and center. But if it's just other people, I'm not sure kasi what the consequences will be. And I don't like any endeavors where I haven't studied the possible consequences. So, ingat-ingat lang nakikita ko yung mga naghihikayat dito and pretending to phrase it in a way, in the negative. Wag naman pong ganyan, and certainly not on my wall. Kung si BBM at si Sara ang nanawagan, andun ako. Pero if I don't know kung sino nananawagan at I haven't weighed the possible consequences of that, not gonna do it. Sabi ni Roldan Ranofo, nung binasa ko talaga yung sinabi ni Lenny about sa pag-junk ng COMELEC Second Division sa DQ, parang naramdaman ko yung lungkot niya. Ay, lungkot lang. Sorry. Sabi ni Alim, wouldn't it be nice to restore the importance of Philippine history and culture sa academics so that we don't lose our heritage? Actually, it is still in the academe. What it hasn't been is it has not been handled well, at least not in the recent years, by the cultural agencies who are empowered to do that. So, they need better methods. Attorney, kung ma-cancel ang COC ni BBM, ano ang katotohanan at possibility na sinabi ng ex-dean ng law school ng Ateneo? Dean Tony was dean of the School of Public Ad, not the law school. Guys, kilala ko yun personal. Kaibigan ko si Dean Tony and he's a Lavinia like me. Na hindi daw COMELEC ang dapat mag-decide lalo na kung kakilala at napakarami ng supporters ng kandidato. Alright? This is Dean Antonio Lavinia. Tony Lavinia, who is from Cagayan de Oro and was a professor at the UP College of Law and later on became the Dean of the Ateneo School of Public Administration. Now, that was, may context po yung sinasabi niya. He wasn't citing a law or doctrine. What he was citing was, kumbaga, like an ethics rule. Sinasabi niya that, kumbaga, it should be doctrine or we should be, the whole purpose of elections is to express the will of the people. And if you try to prevent that using underhanded methods or methods that are not in keeping with hearing the people fully, then hindi dapat ine-encourage yung ganon. But he is also careful to state that he is pro other parlor. So, take it for whatever it is. But take note that he was not the dean of the College of Law of Ateneo. Okay? Um, Agan. Dakilang marites si former Justice Carpio. Kung di ba naman siya naglabas ng malicious article niya noon, di sana walang mga eng-eng minions na sumakay sa pagkamoso niya. Yun tuloy nag-boomerang. Alright. But I disagree. Okay? I think it's one of two things. Either may plano na talaga mag-file ng kaso at siya lang yung unang nag-publicize. Or, um, the suggestion came from him and pinilit na lang nila because yun nga, it encourages, kumbaga, it's a campaign action against BBM. Hindi, kumbaga, if he had mentioned something and the lawyers got an idea because of that, babasahin pa rin naman nila yung batas eh. So you can't say rin naman that this was Justice Carpio's fault kasi obligasyon ng mga abogado aralin na mabuti yung batas at saka yung jurisprudence. Sabi ni Leonardo Ansag, that is why Marcos family ang totoong mga disente, not the claim of the Pinklawan na sila daw ang disente sa lipunan. Sila BBM pinapalampas lang nila ang masasamang sinasabi sa kanila. Yes, halimbawa, diba, sino ba yung nagsabing, papapatay ka ng pamilya ko? Or who threatens with lawsuits and all that. Do you ever hear BBM say that? No. Okay, guys, again I'm not sure where this is coming from. Pero yung pag-cite po ng Wikipedia pertains, if I'm not mistaken, to events. It does not pertain to any legal argument. You can't use Wikipedia to cite the law or to cite jurisprudence. And if it is not pertaining to jurisprudence or to the law, and just simply helps establish facts which the COMELEC says are not in dispute anyway, then it's not, it wasn't really stupid, just maybe superfluous. So I don't really like, um, it's not material kasi. That's why the lesson here is material misrepresentation. If you cited a Wikipedia article, but it is not material, it's not going to make or break your case, then it doesn't necessarily qualify under the category of stupid. Just unusual. Sabi ni Don Ricardo, pwede na daw ako mag-artista. Sino may sabing hindi pa ako artista noon? On the lighter side, sabi ni Orly Lapus, yun. How do you choose your outfit? Grabe. You always stand in awe sa karambola. Malahart evangelista but a lot less costly. Kasi si 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 Hart, she doesn't do street fashion or street expression. She's a designer. That's what her style is all about. Nothing bad, ha? Actually, very, very quite tasteful. Just not my style. And that isn't the my expression, kumbaga. So one of my rules in choosing what I'm going to wear is one, it has to express what I'm feeling that day, and number two, I don't want to spend more. I set limits to how much I spend for my clothes. So that's why I learned to sew. I sew by hand mostly, so now I'm learning how to use the sewing machine again. The last time kasi I used was in high school. But I usually, I sew by hand. So, yun yung rules ko. One is that I don't spend beyond a certain amount. Three. Two, it's street fashion. So, it can be either grungy, goth, mori, dark mori, mga ganyan, romantic goth, etc. It could be 60s or yung mga retro na ganyan. But I always put a cap on a certain amount that I'm willing to spend for an attire. So, yun lang po yun. Even the accessories, hindi pwedeng magastos. I don't really like the idea of spending so much on designer, ganyan. Kasi I like to change constantly. And oh my God, why are we talking about my clothes? Okay. Sabi ni Ma'am Victoria Valdez, may conditional pardon siya na binigay ni dating President Ramos. Contrary sa may nagsabi na si PRRD nagbigay, that was 1984, 1994 siya nakulong. Was it Ramos? Who are we talking to about 1998 or 1994? If we're talking about ERAP, he was pardoned by GMA. Sabi ni Pesto, ay nako, hindi ako magtataka after a few months mala Game of Thrones na yung OOTD. Hindi pa ba? When I'm done. When I'm done, yung mga tinatahi ko, parang ganon. Eto, si Ma'am Cristina Villanueva says, Lenny Robredo is a lawyer. She should know na ang mga cases filed versus the Marcoses are trash. Not necessarily. But the cases have no effect on the candidacy of PBM. All right. So, and also we have to distinguish between criminal cases and civil cases. So the quantum of evidence is different. There is no imprisonment or any penalty like that. Now, with regard to that, so you cannot characterize the cases as simply trash and dismiss them. No, you have to discuss why do you think that they have very little value. Unfortunately, some of them they've already become final, and therefore it cannot be challenged or re-argued anymore. Andyan na siya. So para sa akin kasi, yes, there were cases, and I accept that. But I also accept the fact that these cases prospered at a time when they were out of power. At the time when the courts could have been fully in control of the current whoever was the administration at the time. Plus, it was largely also very political. In other words, it would have affected a Cory or FVR presidency if the Ramoses did not have even if the Marcoses did not have a single case that prospered against them. So, although wala silang conviction, ang pinursigihan nila were the civil cases for ill-gotten wealth. And these were the cases that were filed by the PCGG. Full disclosure, I was with the PCGG under then Commissioner Gerard Mosquera when Andy Bautista was chairman. I didn't have to report every day, but I did handle the Tandingco Huangco cases, and I won on motion for reconsideration. Well, not just me, of course. It was the Solicitor General, but we wrote out the arguments. So, if you're going to ask me, it does not do us any good to rehash what those cases are about. Even the Marcoses, they don't bring it up because andyan na yan eh. And yet, para sa akin, ganito yon. In spite of all the cases, in spite of the demonization, in spite of the shame and humiliation that was rained on them, this is sweet victory to come back, diba? After so many years, after so many decades of being chased out, after being chased out of the country and humiliated by an incoming administration, you are now the forerunner for the next to be the next president. I don't think that we should decry and say that those cases are trash or anything like that. We can accept it and say that makes this victory much sweeter, much better. This is redemption. Sir Aris, yung wish ni Lenny na talunin si BBM sa darating na eleksyon na tatalunin niya ay granted. Uy, I don't think so. Lenny cannot beat BBM kasi guys, you're citing only one half of her wish. Sabi niya, kung sa akin lang, ayoko ng disqualification, gusto ko talunin si BBM sa regular elections because for her, yan yung redemption niya. Yan yung ano niya, yun yung bawi niya. She has been under a cloud for 5 years, a cloud of suspicion that she is complicit in the cheating in the 2016 elections to get her to sit. Para sa kanya, winning against BBM will redeem her name. So don't say nag-wish granted kay Lenny. I do not want her wish granted. I don't care. Okay? Because I know that these cases that are being filed against BBM to keep him from running, have very little to stand on or to go on. So wag naman natin sasabihin na matatalo ni Lenny si BBM. Be careful what you're saying. She said that she wants to beat him, not in disqualification, but during elections. Why would we say granted? Oh, please. I think that's just simply wishful thinking on her part. Ay, anong may sala? Wala akong sinasabing may sala si Ma'am Pinay. Ano nangyari? Wala akong sinasabi sa inyo, madam. Ano yun? Oo. Nabasa ko sa comment ng kakamping, let's produce another attorney Trixie. Ha? They said that? Sorry to say, I haven't seen anyone, even from the side of lawyers for Lenny, thoroughly elaborating and demonstrating punto por punto legal docs from the court, mga desisyon ng korte para maunawaan ng karaniwang tao mga issue, puro pangungutya at pambibintang sinasabi. They are the people that they hate. Parang ano ako. Wow, that's a compliment. When your enemies are trying to find somebody like you. Ang saya naman nun. Ah, ayun dun si, Sutil. So, wish granted, gigil. Oh, hindi ako galit sa inyo, pero I just wanted to be careful what you're saying. Alam nyo, ang lawyers kasi, there was a time back in the US, back the time during Abraham Lincoln, when he was still a practicing lawyer, you know that they called lawyers wordsmiths. That's why we have to be careful about our grammar. Kasi what we say, we may mean one thing and then something else comes out. So even sa we apologize to all the Christians at yung mga fundamentalists out there. But in witchcraft, in spell casting, And I know this is Attorney Nick's territory, but that doesn't mean I'm completely ignorant of it because we're all light workers. So in spell casting, you have to be also very careful what your intent is, and to be able to cast the precise thought. Otherwise, you might end up having a dragon in your backyard burning your house down. So parang ganon. So be careful. Ah, ah, sabi ni Jan Ruiz Dial, gusto kanila i-copycat gaya ng ABL, anybody but Lenny Group. Name is Christine Cunanan. I love that group. They're so cute. And they're so cool. Kahit ginudumog sila ng mga trolls, dead ma. 'Di ba? O kaya yung mga tipong, oh, nobody can look down on their noses worse than the yellows, than the anyone's but Len, and then the anyone but Lenny group, and they do it with so much style, intelligence, and panache. Oh my gosh, that's why I love those people. Paano po kung sa first division matalo si BBM, ano po mangyayari? Bakit ang hilig ninyo talagang mag-isip ng nega? Sobra kayo. Grabe kayo yung parang worst case scenario. Parati, ano. Well, the BBM can appeal to the NBank, and after that to file a petition for certiorari with a prayer for temporary restraining order with the higher court. So, and in all likelihood, did you notice what happened with the party lists? Halos lahat sila, meron silang PRO, a mandatory injunction which allows them to run. So, bakit? Kasi the court normally allows, pagka may ganon, kino-contest, normally, kung on the face of the petition, nakikita na mas malaki yung damage if they don't allow them to run as opposed to allowing them to run. Kasi kung kunwari you don't allow them to run, tapos in the end, meron para silang karapatan, tama naman yung pinagbabasihan nila, then you deprive them of that opportunity. So, para sa akin, I'm very optimistic about yung mga cases ni BBM. Cautiously optimistic because there are still remedies after in case the worst thing happens in the first division. But you know what? I don't think so because part also of what the COMELEC is doing is to uh, streamline the proceedings. They have to start printing out the ballots. Hopefully by tomorrow kasi delayed na sila by one day. And so I don't think that they will issue a decision that will be so controversial it might hold up the printing of the ballots again. Of course this should be in accordance with law and jurisprudence. So sabi ni Ma'am Pinay, no po, nawala yung internet connection niya. Akala ko nag-lowbat na kayo. It seems to be on my end. Sorry na. Okay lang. Medyo na-guilty naman ako. Sabi ko, baka, baka sabi ni Sir Aris, di ko daw tinapos. Pero ayoko kasi, ganito yan natitrigger ako na binibigay natin yung wishes ni Lenny. Ganun na lang yan. Okay lang. Sabi ni Ali, true, cool na cool lang kami sa Orig na ABL group. Actually, nairaos ko ang isolation ko dahil sa Orig ABL. Sobrang, dapat may standing ovation kayo, guys. ano, Related topic, sabi ni June Rojas. Last two questions na. With material misrepresentation case being shut down, what will happen to the reputations of lawyers who filed? Well, it depends. Ganito yon, you're only as good as the last case that you handled. So, you lose that last case, you go for the next case, you win that resounding victory, redemption. Hopefully, they don't have disciplinary cases, although I don't think so. Ako, personally, I don't like disciplinary cases against fellow members of the profession. But I kind of draw the line. Like, I would like to see Senator De Lima have a disciplinary case. Kasi I know so many other lawyers who were either disbarred or suspended. Ang bibigat ng mga penalties for sexual misconduct or yung mga ganon, infidelity cases. And in her, it was so publicly discussed and so blithely dismissed by her as frailties of a woman. I would like to see a disciplinary case filed against her for that, because the Supreme Court has been very harsh with other lawyers in similar situations na ganon. So, wish list lang po yan. I don't want to do it because she's still a member of the profession, and para sa akin, I know what it's like to be oppressed. And that's why I so, how do you call this? Relate to BBM and making this kind of a sweet comeback. You're only as good as the last victory, diba? Or the last defeat. So if you're coming from a defeat, you beat that down, come back. Sabi ni Super Just, hindi sila sanay sa'yo, ma'am. Kami nga mga old sutil gigil, happy irritated ka, andito pa rin ka. Grabe. Para akong parating, para akong, ano bang tawag yun, neurotic. Panago-bago ng mood. Gusto namin totoong tao tulad nyo at ni Sir Ahmed, mas makulit siya. Totoo naman din yan. Ay, sabi ni Ma'am Alice, wala bang way para mag-send ng stars sa page mo? Ay, asikasuhin ko na. Kasi sa Facebook dati, ginagawa ko na sana yung parang ganon. Kaya lang sinrattle kami, biglang sinumbong kami, allegedly may fake news daw kami. Which I keep contesting, pero ay, wala, deadma, ay nako. Nagka-pandemic, so hindi kami makakontest ng mga yon. So, we weren't eligible. I have to check again kung eligible na naman kami dito sa Facebook. Pero kung pwede, madam, mas madali po talaga sa YouTube. Subscribe na kayo. Sabi ni Freeman, I heard na sa Saturday na yung first debate ng presidential aspirants, abangar siya. Yes, oh by the way DWIC is affiliated with CNN and CNN will be handling one of the debates. So, we'll see you there. Finally, last na. Wala bang repercussion sa mga lawyers ng petitioner na nag-misquote sila ng batas, Code of Ethics? It's possible if somebody files a case. BBM won't do it. He's not the type. Inday Sara has not been affected. They believe that this case was, kumbaga, walk in the park. But if you, as a member of the public, feel outraged, you can write to the court and file a complaint. Let's see how it goes. I haven't heard of the public actually complaining, pero I'm looking at the cases that they filed against Attorney Gadon, di ba? So, with the Supreme Court taking cognizance of it, even if there was no actual complaint. So, I think that if you feel strongly about it, you can write to the Supreme Court or file your petition. You can ask any lawyer to assist you, particularly sa mga free legal aid or dyan sa PAW, they can help you and assist you in that. Alright? So, maraming salamat. Yun sa mga nagtatanong kung ano yung sa tingin ko magiging decision ng First Division, hindi po tayo nagbobolang kristal. It's in the shop. But based on the law and jurisprudence that I have read, I'm cautiously optimistic about the results. Okay, ganun na lang muna. Cautiously optimistic. There are things there like, maybe one of the commissioners might decide that, let's do it this way, and then throw a monkey wrench into all our best laid plans. So, barring that, I am cautiously optimistic. So, on that note, maraming salamat sa pagsubaybay sa live natin ngayong araw na ito. Huwag pong kakalimutan, like and share. Kung hindi pa po kayo nagpa-follow sa Facebook, follow naman kayo dyan and like the page. At saka, subscribe to our YouTube channel please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And to our Facebook. Actually, bumabalik na yung dati. Dati we were getting, ang bilis ng taas namin before. It was something like 300 to 500 per day, and then it became 1,000 na lang per week, and then so on, habang tinatapos kami. So, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe YouTube and our Facebook. We'll see you tomorrow on Karambola. Huwag pong kakalimutan, ha? Comment rin pala. If hindi nyo kami nakikita sa newsfeed, aside from unfollow, follow, refresh, follow, put on favorites, comment, and kahit mag-like lang kayo dun sa mga posts and comment, the more often, the more likely we will show up on your newsfeed. Okay? Maraming salamat. Good night, everybody. We'll see you on Karambola tomorrow. Hopefully, andun si Atty. Larry Gadon. See you guys. Have a good night, everyone.